Lives of veteran black actors after leaving the Hollywood spotlight. They were once the faces that filled theaters, the voices that defined generations, and the performances Hollywood could not replace. But when the cameras stopped, the applause faded and the spotlight moved on something far more powerful began. These veteran black actors didn't fall off, they stepped away. What happened next was not decline, but transformation. In today's video, we uncover the real lives they chose after fame, the sacrifices Hollywood never talks about, and the quiet power of walking away on your own terms. Stay until the end, because one story may completely change how you define success. Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and let's begin. Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier did not fade away from Hollywood. He stepped back deliberately with clarity and control that few stars ever achieve. After reshaping American cinema for more than 5 decades, Poitier chose to leave the spotlight while his legacy was still intact. By the late 1990s, he had largely retired from acting not because roles vanished, but because he believed his work had reached its moral and artistic conclusion. Poitier's career included more than 40 films, many of them cultural milestones. In 1964, he became the first black actor to win the Academy Award for Best Actor for Lilies of the Field, a historic achievement that permanently altered Hollywood's racial barriers. Films such as In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and To Sir with Love positioned him not just as a leading man, but as a symbol of dignity during the height of the civil rights era. Yet Poitier was also acutely aware of the limitations placed on him and the risks of becoming trapped by expectation. After leaving active filmmaking, Poitier embraced a life of intentional privacy. He spent much of his later years between the United States and the Bahamas, distancing himself from premieres, award cycles, and industry politics. Rather than seeking relevance through cameos or nostalgia-driven roles, he focused on reading, writing, and family life. He also served as Bahamian ambassador to Japan and to UNESCO, extending his influence into diplomacy and global cultural dialogue. In an industry built on constant visibility, is choosing invisibility, the strongest form of self-respect. Financially secure through decades of disciplined work and residual income, Poitier was never motivated by the need to remain in the public eye. He frequently spoke about refusing roles that compromised his principles, even when they offered financial reward. In retirement, those values became even more pronounced. He avoided public controversy, gave few interviews, and allowed his earlier contributions to speak for themselves. In 2009, Poitier received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest civilian honors in the United States, recognizing his cultural and social impact beyond cinema. When he passed away in 2022 at the age of 94, tributes came not only from actors and filmmakers, but from political leaders, educators, and civil rights figures worldwide. Sidney Poitier's post-Hollywood life stands as proof that true legacy does not require constant reinvention. Sometimes the most powerful final act is knowing when to leave the stage and leaving it with grace, purpose, and nothing left to prove. Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson never truly left Hollywood. She redefined her relationship with it. While many actors fade quietly after their peak years, Tyson chose a different path. Fewer roles, greater meaning, and absolute control over how she would be remembered. Her life after stepping back from constant film work became a masterclass in artistic discipline and personal integrity. Tyson's career spanned more than 6 decades, with over 50 film and television credits. She rose to prominence in the early 1970s, with Sounder 1972 earning her first Academy Award nomination. From that point on, she became known not just for her talent, but for her selectiveness. Tyson famously refused roles that portrayed black women as stereotypes, even when that meant long gaps between projects. As she aged, this principle only grew stronger. In her later years, Tyson dramatically reduced her on-screen appearances, but never disappeared from cultural relevance. She focused on legacy rather than visibility, accepting roles only when they aligned with her values. This approach culminated in a rare achievement in 2018. She won a Tony Award at age 93 for The Trip to Bountiful, making her one of the oldest recipients in Tony history. That same year, she received an honorary Academy Award recognizing a lifetime of uncompromising work. Beyond acting, Tyson devoted significant energy to mentorship and public speaking. She became a guiding voice for younger Black actresses navigating an industry that still struggled with representation. Rather than offering surface-level advice, Tyson spoke openly about sacrifice, rejection, and the cost of saying no in a system that rewards compliance. Her words carried weight because they were backed by lived experience, not theory. In 2021, just days before her passing, Tyson released her memoir, Just As I Am. The book offered a candid reflection on her career personal struggles and the quiet battles she fought behind the scenes. It was not a farewell tour, but a final act of authorship, allowing her to frame her own narrative before others could simplify it. Financially secure yet uninterested in excess, Tyson lived modestly compared to many of her peers. Recognition, not wealth, was never her primary currency. When she passed away in January 2021 at the age of 96, tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry, civil rights leaders, and multiple generations of performers. Cicely Tyson's life after the spotlight proves that stepping back does not mean stepping down. By choosing restraint over exposure, she preserved something rare in Hollywood: respect that deepened with time and a legacy that never needed reinvention. Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman never announced a formal retirement from Hollywood. Instead, his life after the spotlight unfolded as a slow, intentional recalibration, one shaped by age experience and a deep understanding of how fame can consume those who cling to it too long. Rather than chasing relevance, Freeman chose longevity with dignity, redefining what it means to age gracefully in an industry obsessed with youth. Unlike many stars, Freeman's rise came late. He was already in his early 50s when films like Driving Miss Daisy, 1989, Glory, 1989, and later The Shawshank Redemption, 1994, established him as a leading man. Over his career, he appeared in more than 100 film and television projects, and movies featuring Freeman have generated over $4 billion at the global box office. That level of success gave him something rare: the freedom to slow down without fear of being forgotten. By his 70s, Freeman began reducing physically demanding roles not as a retreat, but as a practical response to aging and health realities. After a serious car accident in 2008 left him with permanent nerve damage in one hand, his approach to work became more selective. He shifted away from relentless shooting schedules and toward projects that relied on presence, wisdom, and voice rather than physicality. Is stepping back from leading roles a sign of decline or proof that an actor understands their own limits? One of Freeman's most strategic transitions was into narration. His instantly recognizable voice became a cornerstone of documentaries, science series, and historical programs, allowing him to remain culturally influential without the pressure of constant on-screen performance. This move preserved his public presence while giving him control over time, energy, and health, an option many actors never managed to secure. Outside Hollywood, Freeman embraced a quieter life in Mississippi, where he owns property and invests in local community initiatives. He has spoken openly about valuing peace, routine, and distance from the industry's noise. His interests expanded into environmental causes, including beekeeping advocacy, reflecting a post-fame identity rooted more in stewardship than stardom. These pursuits rarely come with red carpets, but they offer something Freeman clearly values: more stability. Financially independent and critically untouchable. Freeman never needed a comeback narrative. When he does appear in films later in life, it is often in roles that reinforce authority, moral gravity, or reflection traits audiences already associate with him. He works less, but with intention. Morgan Freeman's life after Hollywood's brightest years illustrates that relevance does not require constant exposure. By choosing restraint over saturation, he preserved both his health and his legacy. His story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful evolution in a long career is learning when to speak less and still be heard. Danny Glover. Danny Glover did not disappear after stepping away from Hollywood's center stage. He redirected his influence. While many actors define retirement as rest or retreat, Glover transformed the later chapters of his life into a second calling, one rooted in activism, global awareness, and social responsibility. For him, leaving the spotlight was not about slowing down, but about choosing a different arena. Glover rose to international fame through films like The Color Purple, 1985, Lethal Weapon, 1987, and To Sleep with Anger, 1990. Across a career spanning more than 4 decades, he accumulated over 100 film and television credits, becoming one of the most recognizable black actors of his generation. Yet by the early 2000s, Glover began appearing less frequently in major studio projects, not due to lack of opportunity, but because his priorities had shifted beyond box office metrics. As he reduced his Hollywood workload, Glover intensified his involvement in activism. He became deeply engaged in labor rights movements, anti-apartheid efforts, global health campaigns, and educational initiatives across Africa, Latin America, and the United States. Unlike celebrity activism driven by branding, Glover's work was hands-on and long-term. He served as a goodwill ambassador for the United Nations Development Program, focusing on poverty, economic justice, and access to education. Financial security from decades in entertainment gave Glover the independence to speak freely, even when his positions were controversial or unpopular in mainstream media. He openly criticized political systems' corporate exploitation and racial inequality, understanding that visibility carried responsibility. As a result, he became less visible in blockbuster cinema, but more respected in academic activist and grassroots spaces. In his later years, Glover continued acting selectively, often choosing independent films or projects aligned with social themes rather than commercial appeal. These roles allowed him to remain creatively active without compromising his principles. Unlike many veterans who rely on nostalgia roles, Glover avoided repeating familiar characters, signaling that comfort was never his goal. Physically, Glover also navigated health challenges, including managing the effects of chronic conditions while maintaining an active travel and speaking schedule. Rather than framing aging as limitation, he approached it as recalibration, adjusting pace without abandoning purpose. Danny Glover's life after Hollywood's peak years offers a powerful counter-narrative to traditional celebrity retirement. By stepping away from constant fame, he gained freedom to operate where cameras rarely follow. His post-spotlight journey proves that relevance does not always come from screens or headlines. Sometimes it comes from standing where it matters most, even if fewer people are watching. In choosing impact over applause, Danny Glover ensured that his later legacy would not be defined by the roles he once played, but by the convictions he refused to abandon. Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington has never announced a dramatic farewell to Hollywood. Instead, his life after peak stardom has been defined by strategic withdrawal, a conscious decision to slow the pace, narrow the focus, and redefine success on his own terms. For Washington, stepping back from constant film production was not about exhaustion, but about evolution. Over a career spanning more than 45 years, Washington built one of the most respected resumes in American cinema, with over 50 film credits and 2 Academy Awards glory in 1990 and Training Day in 2002. By the time he entered his late 50s and 60s, he had already achieved what many actors chase for a lifetime box office power, critical acclaim, and cultural authority. That freedom allowed him to choose when and why to work, rather than working to remain visible. Rather than disappearing, Washington shifted his energy toward areas that offered depth instead of exposure. He returned repeatedly to the stage, particularly Broadway, where the demands are artistic rather than commercial. Theater allowed him to reconnect with the discipline that shaped his early training without the noise of Hollywood marketing cycles. These performances were not about reinvention, but refinement, stripping acting back to its essentials. When an actor no longer needs to prove anything, what does meaningful work actually look like? Faith and family also became central pillars of Washington's later life. He has spoken openly about prioritizing spiritual grounding and private discipline over public praise. Unlike many peers who increase visibility through social media or constant interviews, Washington deliberately limited access, understanding that mystery can protect longevity. His absence from celebrity culture was not accidental, it was intentional. Another defining aspect of Washington's post-spotlight years has been mentorship. He quietly invested time and financial resources into supporting younger actors, filmmakers, and students, often without public acknowledgement. From funding education to offering guidance behind closed doors, Washington positioned himself less as a star and more as a steward of the craft. These contributions rarely generate headlines, but they shape futures. Financially independent and creatively secure, Washington never relied on nostalgia roles or legacy sequels to sustain relevance. When he does appear in films later in life, the characters often reflect authority, moral tension, or introspection roles that mirror his own stage of life. He works less frequently but with unmistakable purpose. Denzel Washington's life after Hollywood's most intense years demonstrates that retreat does not equal retreat from influence. By reducing output and increasing intention, he preserved both respect and control. His journey proves that true power in entertainment is not staying everywhere forever, but knowing when to step back, deepen impact, and let legacy speak louder than presence. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson never truly disappeared from Hollywood, but his life after peak stardom reveals a deliberate shift in how and why he works. Unlike many veteran actors who fade quietly or chase prestige in their later years, Jackson chose sustainability. His post-spotlight phase is less about dominance and more about control over time, health, and personal fulfillment. Jackson's ascent was unconventional. He did not become a household name until his mid-40s, following his breakthrough in Pulp Fiction 1994. From there, his output was relentless. Over the course of his career, he accumulated more than 150 film credits, making him one of the most prolific actors in cinema history. Films featuring Jackson have grossed over $27 billion worldwide, placing him among the highest-grossing actors of all time. By the time he reached his 60s, he had already secured financial freedom and cultural permanence. As he aged, Jackson made a conscious decision not to slow down entirely, but to work smarter. Rather than carrying films physically or emotionally, he gravitated toward ensemble roles, franchise appearances, and characters that allowed flexibility. This approach reduced strain while keeping him creatively engaged. Unlike peers who disappeared for years, Jackson remained visible without being overexposed. Health also played a role in his recalibration. Jackson has spoken openly about managing chronic pain and the long-term physical cost of decades on set. Instead of framing these realities as limitations, he adjusted his workflow. He selected roles that respected his boundaries, proving that adaptation, not denial, is key to survival in entertainment. Away from cameras, Jackson's later life became more private. He prioritized family routine and long-term stability over Hollywood's chaos. Rarely courting scandal, he avoided the tabloid narratives that derail many careers. This consistency allowed him to age publicly without humiliation, a rare achievement in an industry that often discards its elders. Financial independence gave Jackson freedom from prestige anxiety. He never felt pressure to chase awards or legacy validation. In fact, his career defied traditional Hollywood logic, massive commercial success without relying on the Oscars as a benchmark. That mindset carried into his later years, where satisfaction came from steady work, collaboration, and enjoyment, not reinvention. When Jackson appears on screen now, his presence signals familiarity, authority, and assurance. He no longer needs transformation to command attention. His voice timing and energy remain intact even as frequency becomes optional. This balance between presence and restraint defines his post-spotlight chapter. Samuel L. Jackson's life after Hollywood's most demanding years proves that stepping back does not require stepping away. By choosing endurance over intensity, he secured something many actors never reach: a career that ages without collapse. His story reminds us that the final chapters are not about how loudly you perform, but how long you last without losing yourself. Forest Whitaker. Forest Whitaker did not leave Hollywood in search of rest. He stepped back to pursue something far heavier than fame purpose. While many veteran actors spend their later years protecting image or chasing relevance, Whitaker used his post-spotlight years to expand his identity beyond cinema, transforming from award-winning performer into global humanitarian. Whitaker's acting credentials were already unquestionable long before he reduced his Hollywood presence. Over a career spanning more than 40 years, he appeared in over 80 film and television projects, culminating in an Academy Award for Best Actor in 2007 for The Last King of Scotland. That performance cemented his place among the most respected actors of his generation. With critical acclaim, financial security, and industry credibility firmly established, Whitaker reached a rare position: the freedom to redefine success. Rather than remaining tethered to Hollywood's production cycle, Whitaker gradually shifted his energy toward international peace and humanitarian work. He founded the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, WPDI, an organization focused on conflict resolution, youth empowerment, and education in war-affected regions across Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. His involvement was not symbolic. Whitaker traveled extensively, working directly with displaced communities, former child soldiers, and marginalized youth, often far from cameras or press coverage. When an actor has already proven their talent, is it more powerful to entertain the world or to help heal it? Whitaker's commitment extended into global diplomacy. He was appointed a UNESCO Special Envoy for Peace and Reconciliation, a role that placed him at the intersection of culture, education, and international policy. In this capacity, he used storytelling not for box office returns, but as a tool for dialogue and trauma recovery. His understanding of narrative, shaped by decades in film, became central to his humanitarian approach. Despite his global activism, Whitaker never fully abandoned acting. Instead, he became highly selective, choosing roles that aligned with depth rather than visibility. When he appeared on screen in later years, it was often in projects exploring power, morality, or historical consequence. Acting became complementary to his mission, not its centerpiece. Privately, Whitaker adopted a quieter lifestyle, balancing family life with his international commitments. He avoided celebrity excess, choosing routine and discipline over spectacle. This restraint allowed him to age without the public unraveling that has derailed many high-profile careers. Financial independence insulated Whitaker from the need to commodify his image. Unlike peers who rely on nostalgia or franchise dependence, he maintained autonomy, working when he chose, disappearing when necessary. That independence preserved both credibility and dignity. Forest Whitaker's life after the Hollywood spotlight demonstrates that legacy does not peak with awards. For him, the most meaningful chapters began after acclaim, when attention was replaced by intention. His journey proves that stepping away from fame can sometimes move a person closer to impact, and that true influence often grows strongest where applause cannot reach. James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones did not retreat from Hollywood with noise or spectacle. His life after the spotlight unfolded quietly, shaped by restraint, health awareness, and an unwavering respect for craft. Unlike many legendary actors who struggle with fading visibility, Jones chose a path defined by preservation of voice, dignity, and artistic integrity. Jones's career spanned more than 6 decades with over 140 film, television, and stage credits. He became one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment history, from Shakespearean theater to blockbuster cinema. Winning 2 Tony Awards, an honorary Academy Award, and a Grammy, Jones achieved the rare EGOT-equivalent recognition few performers ever touch. By the time he entered his later years, his legacy was already unshakable. As age advanced, Jones gradually reduced on-screen appearances, particularly physically demanding roles. This was not a retreat caused by irrelevance, but a conscious adjustment to health realities. He had long been open about his lifelong struggle with stuttering, a condition he overcame through poetry and stage discipline. In later life, maintaining vocal strength and clarity became a priority, leading him to protect his most valuable instrument rather than exhaust it. Instead of constant screen work, Jones focused on selective voice performances and theater-related contributions. He became increasingly associated with narration archival recordings and limited engagements that allowed control over pacing and energy. Even when audiences heard him less frequently, his presence remained unmistakable proof that impact does not always correlate with volume. Away from Hollywood's machinery, Jones lived with deliberate privacy. He avoided celebrity culture, social media exposure, and public controversy. This distance allowed him to age without spectacle or rarity in an industry that often turns decline into entertainment. His later years were spent reflecting, mentoring quietly, and supporting institutions tied to theater and education, rather than chasing renewed fame. Financial security from decades of disciplined work freed Jones from pressure. He never relied on comeback roles, nostalgic appearances, or reinvention narratives. When he did participate in projects later in life, they were purposeful, chosen for meaning rather than visibility. His approach reinforced a simple truth: knowing when not to perform is as important as knowing how to perform. As health concerns increased, Jones eventually stepped back almost entirely, allowing his earlier body of work to stand untouched. This decision preserved his legacy from dilution. When tributes and honors continued to arrive, they did so without him needing to reassert relevance. James Earl Jones's life after the Hollywood spotlight stands as a lesson in restraint. He showed that mastery does not demand constant display, and that silence, when earned, can speak louder than any monologue. His final chapters were not about holding on, but about letting go with grace, proving that true greatness knows when the performance is complete. Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence Fishburne never truly vanished from Hollywood, but his life after peak fame reflects a conscious shift away from mass visibility toward creative control. Unlike many actors defined by a single iconic role, Fishburne approached the later stages of his career with precision, choosing evolution over repetition and influence over attention. Fishburne's career began unusually early. He appeared in Apocalypse Now, 1979, as a teenager, then steadily built credibility through theater, television, and film. By the time he portrayed Morpheus in the Matrix trilogy, starting in 1999, he had already accumulated decades of experience. That role made him a global symbol of authority and philosophical depth. Over the course of his career, Fishburne has amassed more than 100 film, television, and stage credits, earning an Academy Award nomination, a Tony Award, and multiple Emmy nominations, placing him among the most versatile actors of his generation. As blockbuster fame intensified, Fishburne made a notable decision. He resisted being trapped by franchise identity. Rather than chasing constant sequels or action-heavy roles, he gradually diversified his focus. In his later years, he leaned more heavily into theater, independent film, and producing spaces that offered creative ownership rather than commercial pressure. This shift allowed him to remain active without being consumed by Hollywood's cyclical demands. Is real artistic freedom found in bigger roles or in choosing when to say no? Behind the scenes, Fishburne expanded his influence as a producer and creative partner, helping shape stories rather than simply performing them. Producing gave him leverage to support projects with cultural weight, complex characters, and long-term value, especially stories centered on Black identity that did not rely on stereotypes or spectacle. This behind-the-camera authority marked a clear evolution from performer to architect. Fishburne also returned repeatedly to the stage where performance depends on discipline rather than image. Theater offered him something Hollywood rarely provides aging actors respect without expiration. These stage commitments kept his craft sharp while insulating him from the relentless visibility of celebrity culture. Personally, Fishburne adopted a more private lifestyle, carefully separating professional presence from personal life. He avoided the tabloid-driven exposure that has derailed many long-running careers. This restraint allowed him to age publicly without scandal or forced reinvention, an increasingly rare achievement. Financial independence played a crucial role in this transition. Having secured stability through decades of work, Fishburne was never pressured to accept roles for relevance alone. When he appeared in later projects, his presence often conveyed authority, experience, and moral complexity qualities aligned with his real-life stage, rather than nostalgic echoes of the past. Lawrence Fishburne's life after Hollywood's brightest spotlight demonstrates that longevity is not about staying everywhere at once. It is about direction. By shifting from visibility to control, from fame to authorship, Fishburne ensured that his later career would not be defined by what he once was, but by what he deliberately chose to become. Bill Duke. Bill Duke represents a rare kind of veteran Hollywood figure, one who consciously stepped away from the spotlight not to disappear, but to gain power where cameras rarely look. While many audiences remember Duke for his commanding on-screen presence in films like Predator 1987, Commando 1985, and Menace II Society 1993, his life after peak acting fame reveals a deeper, more strategic transformation. Standing over 6'4" with an unmistakable intensity, Duke was often cast as authority figures, soldiers or imposing antagonists during the 1980s and 1990s. He appeared in over 40 film and television projects as an actor, frequently sharing the screen with major stars. Yet Duke quickly recognized a structural limitation. Hollywood was willing to use his image, but rarely willing to expand his range. Rather than accept repetition, he chose redirection. By the early 1990s, Duke began shifting behind the camera, focusing on directing and producing. This move marked a turning point in his career. He went on to direct episodes of major television series including Miami Vice, The X-Files, New York Undercover, and American Crime Story. In total, Duke directed more than 60 episodes of television, making him one of the most prolific Black TV directors of his generation. Behind the scenes, he gained something he never fully had in front of the camera control. Duke's post-acting life was defined by intentional influence rather than visibility. He became a strong advocate for diversity behind the camera, openly criticizing Hollywood's gatekeeping practices while actively mentoring younger filmmakers of color. Instead of waiting for permission, Duke built access, using his experience to open doors for others navigating the same industry barriers he once faced. Financial stability from years of consistent work allowed Duke to avoid desperation roles or nostalgia-driven appearances. He acted occasionally, but always selectively, ensuring that his presence served a purpose rather than a paycheck. Unlike many veterans who struggle with aging in front of the lens, Duke avoided public decline by shifting arenas entirely. Privately, Duke adopted a disciplined, low-profile lifestyle. He avoided celebrity scandals, social media overexposure, and tabloid culture. His later years were marked by teaching, speaking engagements, and continued work in television development spaces where longevity is measured by knowledge rather than youth. Importantly, Duke never framed his transition as a loss. In interviews, he has emphasized that stepping behind the camera was not retreat, but advancement. Acting gave him recognition. Directing gave him legacy. That distinction shaped the second half of his career, and protected him from the instability that affects many former stars. Bill Duke's life after the Hollywood spotlight challenges the idea that relevance requires visibility. His journey proves that power often shifts rather than fades. By leaving center stage and taking command from behind the scenes, Duke ensured his impact would outlast his image, demonstrating that sometimes the smartest move a veteran can make is stepping out of frame and rewriting the story itself. Leaving the Hollywood spotlight did not erase these legends, it revealed them. Some chose privacy over publicity, others redirected their influence toward activism, mentorship, or creative leadership behind the camera. What truly connects them is not how long they remained visible, but how deliberately they stepped away. In an industry built on constant exposure, they proved that restraint can be strength and that legacy is not measured by screen time alone. So here's the question that divides opinions. Is a great career defined by staying relevant for decades, or by knowing when to walk away with dignity and purpose? Share your thoughts below and stay tuned with Legends of Black Excellence for stories that live beyond fame.